They laughed when he asked. A frail man, with torn clothes and weathered hands, stood by the side of a busy street. His voice cracked as he whispered, "Can I play it for food?" Some people chuckled, others shook their heads. To them, he was just another homeless veteran, someone society had forgotten. But when his fingers touched the piano keys, the laughter died. Because what they didn't know was this man wasn't just a stranger on the street. He was a legend. In every city, there are stories hiding in plain sight. We walk past people on sidewalks, glance at them for a second, and move on. We assume we know who they are, where they've been, and what they've lost. But sometimes, the truth is far greater than anything we could imagine. This story begins on a chilly evening in a small American town. Streetlights flickered, cars honked, and life rushed on as usual. On the corner of Main Street sat an old, upright piano, its paint chipped, its wood worn, but its soul still intact. Beside it stood a man, thin, tired, wrapped in a faded army jacket. His name was Jack Reynolds. Most people didn't know Jack. They only saw his ragged clothes, his messy beard, his cardboard sign that read, "Veteran. Hungry. Please help." And so, when Jack timidly asked, "Can I play it for food?" people laughed. They thought it was a joke. But it wasn't. This was the night everything would change. Jack Reynolds wasn't always a man people ignored. Once, he was someone's son, someone's pride, someone with a future bright enough to light up the entire horizon. Growing up in the Midwest, Jack lived a life that on the surface seemed ordinary. His father worked long hours as a mechanic in a small-town garage. His mother, gentle and patient, taught third grade at the local elementary school. Their home wasn't big, but it was filled with warmth, dinners around the table, laughter spilling down narrow hallways, and music that seemed to live in the very walls. It was his mother who first introduced him to the piano. Jack was only 6 when she sat him on the old wooden bench in their living room. The piano was secondhand, slightly out of tune, but to Jack it was a treasure. His small fingers stumbled across the keys at first, producing clumsy sounds that made him giggle. But then his mother guided his hands, showing him the basics, encouraging him with a smile. "Jack," she told him, her voice soft but firm, "when life feels heavy, let the piano carry the weight for you." He never forgot those words. By the time he was 10, Jack was playing songs most adults struggled with. Mozart, Beethoven, Chopin, he absorbed them like sunlight. Neighbors began stopping by just to listen. His father, though not a musical man himself, would sit quietly in his armchair after long days at the garage, watching his son play with pride shining in his weary eyes. But Jack wasn't just talented, he was gifted in a way that made people believe he was born for music. When he played, it wasn't just sound. It was emotion, raw and unfiltered, pouring out of a boy too young to fully understand the weight of what he carried inside. Through middle school and high school, Jack became something of a local prodigy. He played in school concerts, church services, and even small-town festivals. Each performance left audiences stunned. Teachers whispered that he had a future bigger than their little town could hold. But Jack had two great loves, and they were destined to collide. Alongside music, he had a deep sense of duty, something his father instilled in him from a young age. His grandfather had served in World War II, and Jack grew up hearing stories of bravery and sacrifice. While others dreamed of fame, fortune, or escape, Jack dreamed of service. When he graduated high school, scholarship offers trickled in. A music conservatory in Chicago wanted him. A state university offered him a spot in their performing arts program. His mother's eyes sparkled at the thought of her son playing on grand stages, living the life she knew he was capable of. But Jack's heart pulled him in another direction. Instead of packing his bags for college, he walked into a military recruitment office. At 18, he signed his name and swore an oath to serve his country. His parents supported him, but his mother wept quietly that night, staring at the piano in the living room. She knew her son had chosen honor over art, and she prayed the world wouldn't take both from him. Jack went overseas. His training was grueling, but he endured. He proved himself to be brave, resilient, dependable. In combat, he was steady under pressure, a man his fellow soldiers trusted with their lives. But war changes people. The days were long, the nights even longer. He saw things no one should have to see, and though his body remained intact, his mind carried invisible scars. When he returned home, he was a different man. When Jack came back from service, the town welcomed him with parades and speeches. Medals were pinned to his chest. People shook his hand and called him a hero. But once the banners came down and the crowds went home, life was far less glamorous. On the outside, Jack looked fine. He walked upright, strong, and polite. But inside, he was battling storms that no one else could see. Nights were the hardest. He'd close his eyes and the battlefield would return, flashes of explosions, the cries of his brothers in arms, the deafening thunder of gunfire. He'd wake up drenched in sweat, his heart racing, unable to tell if he was safe or still in the fight. He tried to go back to music, to sit at the piano and find comfort the way he once did. But the notes didn't flow the same. His hands trembled, his mind wandered to darker places. Sometimes, halfway through a piece, he would slam the keys shut and walk away, overwhelmed by frustration. Jack found work here and there, construction, warehouse shifts, anything to pay the bills. He even got married to a woman who loved him deeply, a woman who believed she could help him heal. For a while, things were steady. He laughed again, he smiled again, but the shadows of war clung tightly. His sleepless nights grew worse. His temper shortened, his silence grew heavier. His wife tried to hold on, but the weight was too much. After years of trying, she left, whispering through tears, "I love you, Jack, but I can't save you." That broke him. He lost his marriage, he lost his job, he lost the few friends who had stuck around. Piece by piece, life unraveled. And soon, the man who had once been celebrated with parades was standing on a street corner, holding a cardboard sign, invisible to the same world that had once cheered his name. Homelessness wasn't just about sleeping outside. It was about being unseen. People passed him every day, eyes averted, pretending he didn't exist. Some dropped coins into his cup, others muttered cruel words, but most didn't even glance his way. Jack drifted from shelter to shelter, park bench to park bench, wondering how it had all come to this. What hurt the most wasn't hunger or cold, it was the silence. The silence of people who didn't care to ask who he was. The silence of a world that had moved on. Years passed like this. Jack aged faster than he should have. His beard grew long and gray. His back hunched. His eyes lost their spark. Yet deep inside him, buried under the weight of war and loss, lived the same boy who once made neighbors stop in their tracks with music. And then came the night that would change everything. It was a bitterly cold evening. The streets were alive with holiday lights and shoppers rushing home. Jack shuffled along Main Street, his faded army jacket pulled tightly around him. Hunger gnawed at his stomach. He hadn't eaten properly in 2 days. That's when he saw it. An old upright piano, sitting outside a small coffee shop. Its paint was chipped, some keys yellowed with age, but it stood proudly, as if waiting for someone to bring it to life. Jack froze. His breath caught in his chest. He hadn't touched a piano in years, not seriously, anyway. For a moment, it felt like seeing an old friend across the street, someone you'd lost and thought you'd never meet again. He stepped closer, cautiously, almost reverently. His hand brushed the wooden edge. The memories came rushing back, his mother's voice, the sound of his father's proud silence, the nights when the piano carried him through his darkest thoughts. Inside the cafe, laughter and conversation filled the air. People sat with steaming mugs, warm and safe, glancing occasionally at the man outside. Jack swallowed hard. He didn't want to beg again. He didn't want to be another invisible soul on the street. He wanted to offer something, not just ask. So, with a trembling voice, he asked the question that drew laughter. "Can I play it, for food?" At first, people chuckled. Some thought he was joking. A man in a sharp business suit smirked and said, "Sure, buddy. Play us a Mozart concerto and I'll buy you dinner." A few others laughed, shaking their heads. To them, he was nothing more than a ragged stranger. But Jack didn't argue. He didn't defend himself. He simply sat down. The wooden bench creaked beneath him. His hands hovered above the keys, trembling, not just from cold, but from fear. What if he had lost it? What if the music inside him was truly gone? The crowd expected nothing. Some even pulled out their phones, ready to record what they assumed would be a disaster. Jack closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and pressed the first key. The sound was soft, fragile, like a whisper. Then came another note, stronger, and another, until suddenly the air was filled with melody. Rich, haunting, alive. The laughter stopped, conversations died, heads turned. Jack wasn't just playing the piano, he was telling his story. Every chord carried the weight of his journey. Every note bled with sorrow, yet shimmered with beauty. He played as if his very soul had been locked inside him for years, and now, finally, the door had opened. The street fell silent, except for the music. A mother pulled her child closer and whispered, "Listen, really listen." The man in the suit lowered his head, unable to look away. Baristas pressed against the cafe windows, their eyes wide. Someone whispered, "My God, he's incredible." For the first time in years, Jack was not invisible. He was undeniable. The music rose like a tide. Slowly at first, then with power that seemed impossible coming from such weathered hands. Jack's fingers flew across the keys, unbothered by the cracks in his nails, the stiffness of the cold. They moved with purpose, with grace, with the kind of mastery that only comes from a lifetime of devotion. It wasn't just skill, it was storytelling. The melody carried pieces of his childhood, the warmth of his mother's smile, the echo of his father's pride. Then it shifted, darker, carrying the sounds of war, the chaos, the fear, the grief. The notes clashed and collided, then softened again, trembling with loss. Finally, the music lifted, rising towards something higher, something hopeful, like the faint light of dawn after a night that felt endless. Passers-by stopped in their tracks. A couple paused mid-argument, their voices dying away as the sound wrapped around them. Teenagers, who had been laughing and scrolling on their phones, lowered their screens and stared. Children sat cross-legged on the pavement, their little eyes wide. Jack was no longer just a man at a piano. He was a force. He was a confession. He was every pain, every memory, every dream that had ever lived inside him, and he was giving it all away. The man in the suit, who had mocked him only minutes earlier, shifted uncomfortably. He felt something he hadn't expected, shame. Shame for his laughter, shame for his judgment. His smirk faded. He couldn't look away. He couldn't deny what was happening. Inside the cafe, baristas abandoned their work to press against the windows. One young woman quietly grabbed a sandwich and a cup of coffee, walking outside to place them gently by the piano bench, tears shimmering in her eyes. When Jack reached the climax of his piece, the street felt as though it was holding its breath. The notes swelled, strong and unrelenting, until finally, after what felt like an eternity, they cascaded into a soft, trembling finish. The final chord lingered in the air, hanging above the crowd like a prayer. And then, silence. For one long moment, no one moved. No one breathed. The night stood still, suspended in awe. Then it came. Applause. Not just polite clapping. Not just casual appreciation. It was thunderous, raw, emotional. People cheered, whistled, shouted. Some cried openly. Strangers hugged one another, as if they had all witnessed something sacred, something unforgettable. Jack opened his eyes, dazed. He hadn't expected applause. He hadn't expected tears in the eyes of strangers. He had only wanted a meal. Instead, he had given a gift no one had seen coming. Money filled his cup. Food appeared on the bench beside him. A jacket was draped over his shoulders by someone in the crowd. For the first time in years, Jack felt something he thought he had lost forever. He felt seen. But the story didn't end there. Among the crowd that night was a woman named Anna Davis. Anna wasn't just any onlooker. She was a journalist for a local paper, someone with a sharp eye for human stories that touched the heart. At first, she had been walking home, her mind occupied with deadlines and articles that felt too routine. But when she heard Jack's music echoing down Main Street, she stopped. She pushed her way through the crowd, her reporter's instinct telling her that this moment was different. When she finally saw him, this frail man, dressed in an old army jacket, playing like a master, she froze. She knew instantly that this wasn't just a street performance. It was a story the world needed to hear. After the applause died down, Anna approached Jack gently. She didn't want to startle him. She introduced herself softly, her voice kind, her eyes warm. "Sir," she said, "that was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. Where did you learn to play like that?" Jack hesitated. For years, no one had asked him about his life, his gifts, his past. People saw only the beard, the ragged clothes, the cardboard sign. But something about Anna's tone made him open up. He explained quietly, haltingly, that he had been a pianist once. Before the army, before life unraveled. Anna's chest tightened as she listened. She stayed with him that evening, sitting on the curb as he ate the sandwich left for him, letting him share fragments of his story. She didn't push too hard. She didn't pry. She simply listened. By the time she went home, she knew she had something important. That night, Anna wrote an article. She titled it, "The Forgotten Veteran with the Hands of a Piano Master." Alongside her words, she posted a video she had recorded on her phone of Jack's performance. She described not just the music, but the way the crowd had shifted, the way strangers had been transformed by a man they had once dismissed. When she hit publish, she had no idea what would come next. By morning, the article had gone viral. By sunrise, Anna's article had spread like wildfire. Social media buzzed with shares, retweets, and emotional comments. People from across the country, and soon, across the world, watched the grainy video of a homeless veteran turning a broken street piano into something heavenly. "Who is this man?" commenters asked. "How can someone this talented be forgotten? We need to help him." Within 24 hours, Jack's face was everywhere. News stations called him the homeless maestro. Radio hosts played clips of his performance. TV anchors replayed the moment he whispered, "Can I play it for food?" before stunning the world with his gift. At first, Jack didn't understand what was happening. He had no phone, no computer. All he knew was that more and more people began showing up to the corner of Main Street, waiting for him to sit down at that battered old piano. Crowds gathered daily, sometimes hundreds deep, holding cameras, offering food, slipping bills into his worn-out cup. But something greater was waiting for him. A well-dressed man approached Jack one afternoon. He introduced himself as Thomas Bradley, a music professor at a nearby university. With tears in his eyes, he told Jack, "Sir, I've studied classical piano my entire life. And I've never heard anyone play with the kind of raw power and beauty you carry in your hands. Please, let us help you." Help came in many forms. Volunteers from a veterans organization stepped forward to get Jack housing, medical care, and counseling for the trauma he had long carried alone. Local churches raised money. Former students of music programs offered to clean and restore the old piano. For the first time in years, Jack wasn't invisible. He wasn't forgotten. He was wanted. He was valued. But even as opportunities poured in, concert invitations, interviews, offers to record an album, Jack remained humble. When asked what he wanted most, his answer surprised everyone. "I don't need fame," he said quietly in one televised interview. "I just want to play. And I want to make sure no other veteran feels as forgotten as I did." Those words struck a chord deeper than any melody ever could. Soon after, a charity concert was organized. Jack walked on stage in a crisp suit, his hair trimmed, his hands steady. The audience filled the theater, a sold-out crowd that included veterans, families, music lovers, and strangers who had seen his video online. When he sat at the piano, silence blanketed the room. And then he began. The same music that had once poured into the cold night air now flowed through the grand hall, richer, fuller, stronger. But Jack didn't play alone. Behind him, projected on a massive screen, were the faces of soldiers, men and women who had served, who had carried burdens the world could never fully see. Jack wasn't just performing for himself anymore. He was playing for them. The concert raised thousands for homeless veterans. More importantly, it raised awareness. Jack used every interview, every performance, to shine light on those who had been pushed to society's edges, just as he once had been. His story became more than redemption. It became a reminder that talent can live in places we least expect. A reminder that service, sacrifice, and humanity deserve recognition. A reminder that behind every face we overlook is a story waiting to be heard. So the next time you see someone on the street, someone others might laugh at, someone easy to dismiss, remember Jack Reynolds. Remember the man who whispered, "Can I play it for food?" and then stunned the world into silence. Because the truth is, we never know the battles people have fought. We never know the gifts they carry, hidden beneath layers of struggle. Jack's journey teaches us that dignity is never lost, it only waits for the right moment to be seen again. And when we choose compassion over judgment, when we choose to listen instead of ignore, we just might discover that the people we overlook are the ones who have the most to give.